Since there was no way to prevent it, he could only pretend it didn't happen. Regarding the energy of souls, he really had no understanding. With the eternal melody, longhaochen quickly cleaned up the battlefield, and when he returned to his companions, aside from Dian Yan, who was still unconscious, the others had regained their ability to move. Lin Xin seemed to have calmed down from his previous emotions. Seeing longhaochen easily clean up the entire battlefield and collect the bodies of both groups of demon cavalry, as well as the nightmare demon horse bodies, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. He gestured towards longhaochen without the others noticing. Longhaochen glanced at him and silently nodded. "How is everyone doing?" Longhaochen asked. Han Yu said. "Other than Dian Yan's serious injuries, everyone else can walk fine, but continuing to fight is a bit challenging. Yuan Yuan Sima and I have consumed bloodthirsty pills and bursting spirit pills. We might be weakened for a while. ANIMEized McDull Pig is also quite injured and can't absorb magic crystals for a short while," Lucy said. "Our side is a bit better off. Han Daoxi and Li Xin still have the strength to fight. Yi Jun burned his life force and fell into a coma. As his spiritual energy recovers, it'll take me at least 3 hours to cast group healing again. Dian Yan will need at least 7 days of my treatment to barely recover his combat capability. Xiaoma and I are similar, and also need about 3 hours to recover our spiritual energy. In this battle, although either of the demon hunting squads lost anyone, it's safe to say they've both been severely battered. The ones who still have combat strength are just longhaochen, Li Xin, and Han Daoxi. Caier is even more pitiful than Dian Yan, who was heavily injured, as it'll take 7 months for her to recover her lost 3 senses." Longhaochen nodded silently, then after a brief pause he said, "I'll have Hao Yu take Dian Yan and Yi Jun, and we'll set off immediately. We'll cross the mountains and go deeper in. Without the obvious target of the Cave of Fearful Wailing, within these mountains, we'll be able to hide more easily. Once everyone's abilities are mostly restored, we can consider returning." Lucy nodded in agreement, but his gaze towards longhaochen held a hint of hesitation. Longhaochen knew what he was pondering. "I recorded everything that happened in the Cave of Fearful Wailing. All the processes are on video. Obviously, this isn't a place we can thoroughly explore. Once we're settled, I'll share the Scrying Gem with everyone for viewing. The recordings from the Scrying Gem can't be faked. At least no one among them has that ability. That requires powerful alchemy." Hearing longhaochen's words, Lucy suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. He simply nodded at longhaochen. Longhaochen continued, "Let's set off then. The bodies of the enemies I collected just now, I'll split the magic crystals among your group by a third." Lucy hurriedly said, "No need, we didn't do much." Longhaochen shook his head, his tone becoming a bit more forceful. "We are a team now, and everything should be distributed as agreed upon. Without you all, my comrades wouldn't have held on until I returned. It's settled then. Let's go." Due to Caier's backlash from the Soul Furnace, longhaochen's mood was extremely agitated, lacking his usual gentleness, but exuding a bit more dominance. However, his strength and abilities were evident, and his words sounded like a matter of course. It would only create a sense of inevitability, even eliciting silent gratitude from the soldier level number 4 demon hunting squad. With so many nightmare devil horses and demon cavalrymen, a third of the magic crystals is not a small amount. The group set off again, although most of them were quite weak and still had injuries. But as professionals, their physical endurance far exceeded that of ordinary people. Bathed in the dawn's light, the 13 of them didn't attempt to leave this mountain range, but rather, led by longhaochen, they crossed peaks and valleys. Continuing deeper, after continuously traversing 2 peaks, they finally stopped in an area with some bushes. It was a valley, with a natural crevice in a rock wall, that provided shelter for them. Once they settled in, it was already full daylight. Lucy became the busiest person, continuously restoring spiritual energy, while also tending to the group's healing needs. To slightly ease longhaochen's mood, Caier gradually regained her mobility. At this moment, he was sitting not far from the crevice's entrance, letting Caier lean against him. Caier appeared very quiet, unable to see, unable to speak, unable to hear, yet she seemed completely unconcerned. Just quietly snuggled against longhaochen's chest. The others were resting, with Han Daoxi on watch duty. Longhaochen held Caier's hand, using his finger to slowly write words in her palm, meticulously describing the entire experience he had gone through in the Cave of Fearful Wailing. Caier couldn't hear, but she could sense, and she actually seemed to enjoy the sensation, letting longhaochen's finger move on her palm, while snuggling against him, much like the clever McDull Pig in ANIMEized's embrace. "Lin Xin, come over here for a moment, I have something to tell you." Li Xin suddenly signaled to Lin Xin with a wave of her hand, motioning him to follow her. Lin Xin hesitated for a moment, his eyebrows furrowing slightly, but he still followed Li Xin deeper into the crevice. Longhaochen gave them a puzzled glance, not saying anything. In his heart, Li Xin was definitely one of the most trustworthy people. He knew her character well, and he didn't know what had happened in the cave before. He continued to write on Caier's palm. The others were each practicing on their own, not paying attention to their side. The crevice was deep, extending nearly 200 meters into the mountain, and looking up, they could see a thin strip of sky. Li Xin continued to walk inward until the figures of the others were blocked by the rock walls, then she stopped. Lin Xin stood a bit behind her with an indifferent expression, absent-mindedly running his fingers through his long, dark green hair, braiding it into a ponytail, leaning against the rock wall as he spoke. "Why did you call me over? To silence me?" Li Xin replied irritably. "You're a man, why keep your hair so long? And in a braid too, from the side, you look even more like a woman than me." Lin Xin rolled his eyes and said, "It's called being stylish, you know. If you don't get it, don't comment." Li Xin retorted disdainfully. "Stylish my foot. When can you look better than HaoChen before?" Saying that, Lin Xin's facial muscles twitched slightly. "Did you call me here, just to put me down? Captain is more handsome than I am, but he also seemed to look more like a girl than I am." Li Xin fell silent suddenly, staring at Lin Xin for a moment before speaking. Sensing the odd atmosphere, Lin Xin looked at her questioningly. "I'm sorry." Li Xin lowered her head slightly. "I was wrong before. I shouldn't have scolded you without knowing the truth, and I shouldn't have brought up painful memories." Lin Xin's body trembled slightly. An indelible pain passed through his eyes, and he lowered his head a bit, tossing his neatly braided hair back. "It's fine. There will always be doubters, and speaking out helps me feel better," Lin Xin said with a bitter smile. Li Xin walked slowly to his side. "If you make a mistake, you should be punished, or else scold me too, or hit me, I'll accept it." Her eyes were earnest, standing before Lin Xin, her determined appearance contrasting with her youthful and heroic looks. Lin Xin's mouth twitched. "Sis, please stop joking around. Can I even beat you? I won't fight back," Li Xin quickly emphasized. "Just for this? I'm going back," Lin Xin replied in a disgruntled tone. As he spoke, he turned and began to walk back where he came from. Li Xin stomped her foot. "I hate feeling indebted to others. If you don't come back, how am I supposed to face your comrades?" "Enough." Lin Xin turned abruptly, angry, and said, "What's the point of hitting you or scolding you? You're not wrong. I'm a coward. I just don't have the guts to learn offensive magic. Even if I hit you or scold you, does that mean my heartache, my inner pain, will lessen even a bit?" Sob. Lin Xin's words suddenly stopped, his already large eyes widened even more. If someone were here, they would witness an extremely bizarre scene. An energetic knight, with one hand pressing against the back of a magician's head, forcing their bodies to collide with the stone wall, and then, hesitantly kissing their lips. Lin Xin's mind at this moment was like a short circuit. Li Xin's hot lips, like molten lava, melted his anger and inner sorrow. At this moment, he felt his whole body go weak, his vision widened, and he was plastered against the wall, as if he had turned into a painted mural. They parted. Li Xin quickly took a few steps back, her armor hitting the opposite side of the crevice. It made a bang. Her pretty face had turned bright red as her rose unicorn. Though she wasn't breathing heavily, her ample chest was still heaving, revealing her unsteady emotions. "It's enough like this," Li Xin said in a harsh tone, but her expression seemed to have a fierce undertone. "You won't fight back or curse me, and I don't have money like you, and I don't have any valuable things to compensate you with. Is this enough? I don't owe you anything." After saying that, she stumbled as she walked away, and after a few steps, she seemed to remember something, turned back to look at Lin Xin, who still appeared like a mural, and couldn't help but angrily say, "You dead man, don't act like you've suffered, this was my first kiss." While saying this, she picked up a small stone and threw it at Lin Xin, hitting his leg, then turned around, and ran off as if flying. Lin Xin turned his head stiffly, watching Li Xin's disappearing figure. His pale face suddenly turned crimson. I was forcibly kissed?" Touching his lips, that hot sensation still seemed to linger. After an unknown amount of time, he finally leaned against the stone wall and walked back outside, his feet still feeling a bit unsteady. He met Chen Yinair head-on, Chen Yinair looking at him with a puzzled expression. "Brother Medicinal Pills, what's wrong with you? You're not feverish, are you? Why is your face so red?" "I'm fine." Lin Xin touched his flushed face, with a somewhat dazed expression, and found a place to sit down. But he couldn't find Li Xin's figure anywhere around. 3 whole days passed, and both demon hunting squads finally regained their combat strength. Of course, this doesn't include Yijun and Dian Yan. These two, one overexerted themselves greatly, and need continuous recovery, the other is still heavily injured. However, they can at least move, just not to face enemies yet. In these 2 days, between Li Xin and Lin Xin, there was always a certain distance maintained, but they couldn't help stealing glances at each other. Others weren't blind either, naturally, they could sense the strange atmosphere between them, but being in a dangerous situation right now, everyone was focused on recovering their strength, and no one had the time to pay attention to such matters. It was assumed that after Li Xin scolded Lin Xin, there might be some awkwardness between them, but if one observed carefully, it would be noticed that Lin Xin's face often turned inexplicably red. "Everyone, come over here." Longhaochen stood next to caier, raising his voice to call. Everyone immediately looked at him, quickly gathering around him. It's been 3 days. Apart from caier, Yijun, and Yan Yan, everyone else has pretty much recovered their strength. I'm sure everyone is curious about what I saw inside the cave of fearful wailing, and what's really inside that cave. I'm going to show you now. Slightly guilty, longhaochen wouldn't truly reveal the secrets of the Tower of Eternity. If he did that, it might not be good for his companions. Perhaps it might even bring them significant trouble. Upon hearing longhaochen's words, the crowd turned their curious gazes toward him, mixed with a touch of admiration, as the commander of the number 21 demon hunting squad at commander level, and the sole individual who ventured into the cave for exploration. It can be said that if longhaochen wanted to conceal what he discovered, the members of soldier level number 4 demon hunting squad wouldn't be able to detect anything at all. Without longhaochen, they might have lost their lives long ago. However, longhaochen chose to be open and honest, indicating that he had no intention of claiming all the credit for himself. With longhaochen's spiritual energy infused into the Scrying Gem, the image of the pitch-black world inside the cave of fearful wailing was projected in front of everyone's eyes. It has to be said that the Scrying Gem was indeed a rare treasure. It didn't merely capture the visual images, but also the sounds. As they watched, longhaochen appeared within the image, starting to explore the inside of the cave of fearful wailing. Given the considerable length of the entire image, longhaochen accelerated the process, under his control. When longhaochen was within the cave, and the ear-piercing howls began to assault him, everyone watched as his body was surrounded by intense spiritual fluctuations, causing everyone to inhale sharply in response. Although they hadn't personally experienced it, they could imagine the tremendous pressure longhaochen endured. As the image showed, longhaochen released a protective holy light barrier, and at this moment, he suddenly paused the image. In the midst of everyone's astonished gazes, he said in a deep voice, "It can be said that the results of this exploration aren't very ideal. I'm not sure if this image will ultimately contribute to the success of our mission, but while I was inside the cave of fearful wailing, I gained insight into a new skill by listening to those howls. Since we've all come here together and are striving to complete this mission, I'm willing to share this skill with all of you, so you won't have made the trip in vain. Whether you can comprehend it depends on your own opportunities." The impact of longhaochen's words was undoubtedly profound, especially for the 6 members of soldier level No. 4 demon hunting squad. Their gazes toward him had completely changed. Lucy hardly hesitated to say, "Captain Long, there's no need for you to do this. Creating a self-made skill doesn't need to be shared with anyone else. This is your ability." If it were any other circumstance, perhaps longhaochen wouldn't be willing to share a skill he painstakingly comprehended. However, due to the secret of the Tower of Eternity, he felt somewhat guilty toward the members of soldier level No. 4 demon hunting squad. His innate goodness prompted him to make this compensatory gesture. Longhaochen smiled faintly and said, "The ability I've comprehended is not something everyone can learn. It's relatively more suitable for warriors in close combat. Captain Lu, you don't need to decline. Now that I've said it, I'll definitely do it. Now, pay close attention. I will explain my entire process of comprehension, but whether you can learn it will depend on yourselves. I've named this skill Radiance Ripple. As he spoke, a close holy light barrier emerged from longhaochen's body. He signaled to Li Xin, "Sis, attack my holy light barrier, but do it slowly so everyone can see clearly." Li Xin glanced at longhaochen somewhat sentimentally. One of her little brother's most significant flaws was probably how flashy he was. This was his self-created skill. However, she still followed longhaochen's instructions. In her eyes, longhaochen's leadership qualities were growing stronger, and since he had his reasons for doing this, she complied. The fiery red heavy sword pressed against the holy light barrier. Li Xin activated her spiritual energy, and slowly attempted to cut into the holy light barrier. At the very instant her heavy sword made contact with the holy light barrier, a sudden buzzing sound emerged, and to Li Xin's astonishment, her heavy sword unexpectedly slid off. Unable to penetrate longhaochen's holy light barrier, everyone was watching carefully, and they clearly saw that, as Li Xin's spiritual energy entered the holy light barrier, the entire holy light barrier exhibited intense vibrations, causing Li Xin's sword to slip during these vibrations. This went beyond the defensive capabilities of the holy light barrier. Longhaochen continued, "The skill Radiance Ripple is derived from the high-frequency oscillations of those howls in the cave of fearful wailing. Those howls had such a powerful impact due to the high-frequency oscillations of sound waves. What if we could simulate these high-frequency oscillations with our spiritual energy? This is how Radiance Ripple was born. It can be used for both offensive and defensive purposes, and even with a significant expenditure of spiritual energy, it can greatly enhance our offensive and defensive capabilities." Next, longhaochen candidly explained his understanding of Radiance Ripple in full detail and demonstrated its power multiple times, showcasing its effects to the audience. Just as longhaochen had mentioned, Radiance Ripple isn't suitable for magic users, it's exclusive to close combatants. Everyone also clearly felt the immense power of this skill. Han Daoxi's perception was the terrifying attacking power produced by Radiance Ripple, whereas Dian Yen, a shield warrior, felt a significant enhancement in his defensive abilities. The Scrying Gem continued to play the complete sequence of events in the image, and longhaochen shared his own experiences. The Tower of Eternity appeared at the conclusion of the image, up to the moment when the vengeful spirits lunged at longhaochen. At that moment I felt a sharp pain in my head, as if the vengeful spirits were trying to take over my body. Just then, Hao arrived, and by using soul impact, he drove away those two vengeful spirits. After that, I fell into a period of unconsciousness, and when I woke up, the tower had already disappeared. Throughout the entire ordeal, I never truly understood what it was. The recording capability of the Scrying Gem seemed to have been affected, as it didn't record what happened after I fell unconscious. However, I can be certain that, even if that tower still exists, it's not something I, at my level of cultivation, can confront. Longhaochen had prepared these words in advance. Though he felt a bit guilty speaking them now, considering the impact of the necromancers on the human world, he eventually mustered the courage to recount his partially true, partially fabricated story. After hearing his words, surprisingly, no one raised any questions. The image displayed the might of the Howls, and they acknowledged that they were unlikely to reach the depths of the cave, let alone perform better than longhaochen. The mission could only proceed as planned. Han Daoxi hesitated, then said, "Captain Long, since that's the case, perhaps we should return this image, so we can at least consider half of the mission complete. Also, about your skill." Han Daoxi had spoken the thoughts of all the melee fighters. And as he looked at their eager expressions, longhaochen smiled and nodded. "All right, I'll guide everyone in practicing. After resting for a bit longer, we'll find a way to return to the Alliance." For the moment, everyone was focused and engaged in learning the Radiance Ripple skill. As for their gratitude toward longhaochen, it quietly settled in their hearts. Whether it was collectively learning a secret technique, or individually comprehending a secret technique, it was likely unprecedented in the history of the Temple Alliance. At times like these, individual insight was fully revealed. A day later, Han Yu was the first to comprehend the intricacies of Radiance Ripple, followed by Sima Xian. Although Sima Xian was a priest, he was quite an aggressive priest. He almost simultaneously comprehended the mysteries of Radiance Ripple, just slightly after Han Yu. Relatively speaking, being a priest, comprehending a self-created skill of a knight, was obviously much more difficult than it was for Han Yu, yet he only lagged behind Han Yu by a moment. Observing this, longhaochen couldn't help but chuckle, recognizing that sometimes in losing something, one could gain something else. Sima Xian, who hadn't learned healing magic, displayed exceptional talent in learning offensive skills, thanks to his unique aptitude. On the other hand, the members of the soldier level number 4 demon hunting squad had not found any clue, despite being melee combatants. This was also true for Li Xin. Though longhaochen didn't voice it, he understood that individual insight was greatly influenced by one's inherent spiritual energy and attributes. Sima Xian and Han Yu could quickly comprehend, mainly because their inherent spiritual energy, after sharing the suppressive effect of their respective talents, had already reached 80, and both of them were of the light attribute. Longhaochen realized that all his insights were built upon the conditions of the light attribute, making it easier for them to learn compared to others. Over the course of 3 consecutive days, Dian Yen and Han Daoxi, one after the other, reluctantly gave up on comprehending Radiance Ripple. Although Li Xin and Wan Yuanyuan still hadn't managed to learn it, these two women seemed to have been ignited by determination. Persistently practicing every day, they were both pursuing the potent effects of the Radiance Ripple skill, and with longhaochen's generous guidance, they had both resolved, no matter what, not to give up. Of course, perseverance couldn't completely bridge the gap in insight, and whether they could eventually learn this skill remained uncertain. But at least with effort there's hope for success. Lucy had been observing all these events with a detached eye, and he secretly sighed. It seemed that his demon hunting squad couldn't catch up to longhaochen and his team no matter what. Unless they encounter some fortuitous opportunity in the future, perhaps there's still a slim chance. 7 days had passed since they arrived here for recuperation. Han Daoxi had previously quietly advanced to investigate ahead, and he found that the Cave of Fearful Wailing had already been completely occupied by the demon army. He didn't dare to get too close, but the message he transmitted back informed everyone that at least 3 demon lords had appeared at the Cave of Fearful Wailing, and it was quite possible that even more powerful beings than demon lords had emerged there. Evidently, the loss of hundreds of high-ranking demon knights had incited the demons to retaliate with determination. Moreover, they were determined to seize the Cave of Fearful Wailing. Lucy found longhaochen alone. "Captain Long, there's a large demon army outside now, but it shouldn't affect us. Dian Yen and Yijun have also mostly recovered. Aside from some equipment damage, both of our teams are now in relatively good condition. Shouldn't we consider finding a way to return?" Longhaochen nodded and said, "You're right, it's not suitable to stay here for long. However, Sister and Yuanyuan are still comprehending Radiance Ripple. If we interrupt them now, they might not have another chance to comprehend it in the future. If we want to safely return to the Alliance as quickly as possible, the best way is to follow the Moon Demon Tribe's route, just like when we came here. Lucy was taken aback. Are you suggesting that we go find the leader of the Moonlit Night Merchant Company? longhaochen nodded. Exactly, she's been placed under a restriction by caier, and we don't need to worry about any tricks. With her assistance, we should be able to conserve a lot of energy on our journey back to the Alliance. Lucy voiced his concern. However, there's still a certain level of risk in doing that. What if Yi exposes us without any regard for the consequences? longhaochen responded. I've considered that too. While the likelihood is extremely low, we still have to be cautious. I plan to go alone to the Moon Demon Tribe's location. Yi had given me an address before. It's at the Moon Demon Palace next to the Central Province's Demon God's Palace. I'll go find her to test the waters. If everything seems fine, I'll come back to bring everyone. This way, it should be safer. Plus, with the blood pact teleportation between Hao and me, even if I encounter danger, I'll be able to escape without an issue. Lucy looked deeply into longhaochen's eyes and smiled. Riley, compared to you as a captain, I'm practically useless. longhaochen patted his shoulder and said, Captain Lu, don't say that. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have come this far. We're all members of a team, and the progress we've made among the demons this time is the achievement of every individual. We're a united collective, and everyone relies on your healing abilities. That's settled then. Tonight, I'll set out under the cover of darkness. I'll leave things here in your hands. Since caier has lost her 3 senses now, and she can't teleport with Hao either, I have to leave her behind. If any danger arises here, Hao will inform me right away, and teleport me back. Lucy nodded and said, You can go with peace of mind. I'll take care of the necessary concealment measures. The brief exchange between the two captains had already determined the path the team would take from here on. longhaochen returned to caier's side, gently took her hand, and in the palm of her hand wrote down his decision. Caier nestled by his side, using her slender fingers to gently trace in his palm. Come back soon. Without any entanglement, without insisting on going with him. That's caier, always thinking about longhaochen, that's caier. Holding her gently, feeling the softness of her delicate body, longhaochen, over these days, finally relaxed the tense expression on his face a bit.